is 4:33. Call the Charter Review Committee meeting for the City of Lubbock to order. Pursuant to the City Council policy and procedure for boards, commissions, and committees, the Charter Review Committee will convene in person and via video and teleconference using Zoom. We're going to go into executive session. It's 4:33. We'll hold executive session for the purpose of consulting with city staff regarding pending or conflicted litigation or settlement agreement, and hold consultation with attorney under section 551.071 of the Texas Government Code. So we will take a recess into an executive session at this time. Okay, it is 5:01. We are reconvened from executive session. And now we're in regular session. Ms. Shannon Spencer, representing District 2, was on the Zoom call. Shannon, are you there?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we're going to cover a couple of things today. We're not voting on anything today. We're going to discuss Articles 2. We're going to look at Section 2, Article 2A. We're going to look at Article 4 and Article 9. And we'll discuss those. We're going to start with Article 2. A lot of things in Article 2 in terms of street assessments, 2A, that are subject to state law has changed since the charter was written on how we do street improvements. The general powers associated with that. Amy, you'll walk us through Article 2A.
Yes. And Article 2A, it also works with Article 2, Section 15. Article 2, Section 15 was the original provision for street assessments. And then at a later date, by charter amendment election, Article 2A was added. Both of them regarding street improvements. The idea of this is substantive in nature, but it is also a cleanup. The idea was to take out the procedural things that were in the charter back in 1925, put it all into Article 2A and reference the proper state law and the procedures under state law.
So the city doesn't have to, by policy, define those procedures somewhere else. Those are defined by state law. Is that what you're saying? Okay. We just have to follow that.
Yes. All this is intended to do is to reference those provisions and lock them in our charter.
So why the two sections?
It's just the way that it developed over time, because in 1925, they didn't have the state law in that way. That's the reason why subsequently they passed what we call a general law. It's referenced in Section 2A. So at that time, the city adopted state law for that to allow them to use that other procedure as well. What this intends to do is to keep the state law and go ahead and take out the extraneous provisions that under Section 15.
So we're taking out pretty much all of Section 15 because state law governs how we do street.
I was going to say, could we just, is there a reason to have Section 15 at all?
Yes, it does govern our, it states that we have dominion and control over those streets. So it gives a general power. That first part of that Section 15, that Section 15A does have some powers that we want to obtain. It's not really related to the street assessments. So we keep that portion that's general, take out the extraneous procedures, and then incorporate the state law under that.
So 15A, is that new language? Or is that just,
No, that's the language.
original language? Okay,
Yeah.
we're just stopping at the end of that half paragraph.
Yes.
Gotcha. Easy cleanup.
How much questions on Article 2, Section 15 and Article 2A? Let's look at Article 4. Did Article 2.
So that's 2A.
And then Article 2, Section 19, condemnation. Do you want to cover that real quick?
Yes, this is a similar situation to what I was talking about with the street assessments. Again, the charter calls out a procedure. State law, of course, governs all matters related to eminent domain, and it's an area of the law that the legislature frequently changes. The idea behind this is to strike all the provisions on the antiquated procedures and just reference state law.
Questions on that? It's pretty simple. Then look at Article 4, the initiative, the referendum and recall. We talked a little bit last meeting about the presentation of the filing of the petition, the certification of that, how many days do we give the city manager and the city secretary to certify those? We talked about 10% of the registered voters who are registered at the time of the filing of the affidavit. Only the signatures of the voters registered at the time of the filing of the affidavit shall be valid for a petition. So that's a change from how it is today. Is that correct? We've also got petition must be presented for filing with the city secretary no later than 60 calendar days. Petition for at-large position or election of 45 days for a district position. We're giving them 60 days for one, 45 days for the other. Any thoughts or discussion on that? We're also giving the city secretary 20 days after the petition is presented and filed to complete a certification or certificate of sufficiency. Mr. Chair, that's 20 business days. 20 business days. Yes, thank you. Okay. Discussion on that. Yeah, results of the election. We're looking at an ordinance adopted by initiative may be repealed or amended at any time after the expiration of 6 months by the majority of voted council members. In order to repeal by referendum may be reenacted at any time after the expiration of 1 year by majority vote or after 6 months by unanimous vote of all council members. We talked about that last time.
Yeah, and there's we talked a lot about trying to be parallel within this. What we do in one section, we do in another. And there's a little bit of discrepancy there. We're doing the 6 months by unanimous in one, and the other one is 1 year unanimous, 6. I've got
1 year by
right around,
majority,
1 year
6 months by
majority, 6 unanimous. So that, I don't know if that's a discrepancy we want to tighten up, or if we're fine with that.
Where did, remind me where we went with the discussion about basically defining that power. And I mean, importantly, just a reminder, right now, the article or the charter is silent, which means council at any meeting they want can redo or undo anything done by petition, right? So this basically defines that. And so where do we go with the discussion about, about waiting until the next council is seated? So you couldn't do or undo anything until the next council is seated.
I don't know that we had consensus.
Do we have that?
Why was
Okay.
that the discrepancy?
That's why.
We had talked about that too, waiting until the next council. Which would be every 2 years, which would be every 2 years.
Well,
potentially.
depends on when depends on when the petition was done.
Yeah, it could be.
Well, actually, I think we, and Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, you may have put this in there, as wait until the next council. 1 year, it could be 2 years, and we just did this to keep it more uniform. Because we wanted a set time, and
I think we wanted to take the variability out.
right,
Variability is something we're trying to strike altogether.
right.
So, yeah.
So I don't know. I don't like the 6 months at all, but a year, I think you've got to give something at least a year.
So you could put a year on both of them by majority vote of the council. It gets to consistency.
Yeah, and that's the bar, I think, is majority vote. I wouldn't do a super majority or unanimous. But that's just my thought on it.
Well, I mean, this is it's a political hot potato, even, in any case, regardless of the issue. Yeah, so,
Well, I think
It
it is
is.
too.
so,
and
so
I'm-
wherever that bar is, I mean, it's a pretty high bar anyway.
Well, no,
Just
I
majority.
understand that, but the way you pointed it out, the way the charter is written today, council could undo this election that
Yeah.
we just had next month.
Right.
If they so chose. And we've had situations in the past where and I know this isn't specifically recall, but we're getting into that. Recall one failed, so they turned around in the next month and tried to recall two, and then they turned around and tried to recall three. It's like, come on. So we need to just set a standard, and I think 1 year to even live with it and see if, okay, maybe it's not as bad as we thought it was. Or maybe now we know how to tweak it in a year. Everyone's calmed down, we thought about another tweak.
I like the 1 year. I mean, that one, just consistency on both of those. And I'm just wondering out loud if this is an easier pill to swallow as far as the public is concerned, if we raise the bar on that majority vote and say, I mean, unanimous, I think is probably unrealistic, but what's super majority, 5?
It's 6.
It takes 6. I
Yeah, so-
don't know. I'm not advocating that. I'm just saying, does that put this in a better position of possibly passing?
It doesn't eliminate the political implications of the
It does
council
not.
returning something, so you still have that bullet in the gun, so to speak.
Yep.
I'm kind of with you. I kind of like the majority, but then the 6 months, I could see if they're going to come after and after recall it. I'm kind of with you on that 1 year thing, and I like the majority.
Versus a supermajority.
Yes, sir.
It's a simple majority, so 5-4, whatever,
It's for majority.
4-3.
I mean, because the city councilmen, they're all everybody's different, and if they all agree, I mean, that's good enough for me.
Well, and again, all you're doing on this is really defining or pointing out what could happen already. So you're not changing anything in that regard except for the 1 year. And the rest of it is kind of how it is now because it's silent. So I'm okay with that. I'm fine with the majority. I just thought it's worth conversation.
All right. Any other comments on that on initiative and referendum? Let's talk about petition limitations and restrictions on recall petitions. We talked about, and someone mentioned it earlier, no petition shall be filed against any officer of the city within 6 months after the election or appointment of the official, or within 6 months of such petition being found insufficient, or within 6 months after an election or appointment for such officer's recall. Really, the discussion item is defining that period of time, 6 months.
If you break in, going back to the previous conversation we just had, you raise that to 1 year, that gives you 1 day to file your petition. Because it's a 2-year term.
Just for the mayor. But yeah.
Well, for the mayor, yeah, but worst case or least case scenario, it's, yeah.
What's the city charter say now on the next provision on the 5-year, basically restriction on office?
Well, it's silent as to whether they can run or not again after recall.
Okay, so that,
That's silent.
so this
There
number
is
2
a-
really is not
Yes.
there now.
Now, there is a restriction on the limitation on the recall. It says no recall petition shall be filed against any officer of the city within 6 months after his election, nor within 6 months after an election for such officer's recall.
I think it's fine.
I do too.
Yeah.
I think it's okay with that.
All right.
May I point out one thing? Yes. Very, very early on, a rough draft of these changes included language that was only ever discussed in executive. Please cut me off on that line. There has to do with petitions that are brought forth that may violate state and federal law. And we have addressed that. Is that correct?
Because in this proposed language, talks about when you can bring something forward. It does state that it has to be an ordinance that doesn't violate state constitution or the charter.
Where's that?
That
It's
is in the,
section 1.
yes, if you look at
Paragraph 1.
section 1, subsection 1, where it defines what an initiative is.
Starting in the middle, it says initiative power does not extend to the budget or any capital program or to any ordinance relating to appropriation of money, levies, taxes, or salaries of city officers or employees, or any ordinance not subject to initiative under state law, or that is in conflict with the Constitution or the laws of the state of Texas or this charter. It's that line right there. And we haven't addressed it because we just kind of took care of it very, very early on in this process. But I wanted to highlight it because it is a substantive change.
Comments or questions? Anyone have comments or questions on Article 4?
No.
Sharon, you good?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, let's go to Article 9. Restriction. We've got section 14 of Article 9 is compensation. There was discussion about what do we pay council members, what do we pay the mayor? Do we build in an index that takes care of inflation? The city uses the consumer price index, the CPI, for budgeting. We had discussion that would be kind of a good index, a good metric to use for compensation of city council and mayor, because that's what we use for compensation of employees of the city. We had discussion on what we pay them. I think for some of us that are of the mind that this is not a position that requires a living wage, that this is more of we're not employees of the city. So we talked about $7,000 for city council. We talked about $14,000 for the mayor. I'll open that up for discussion at this time.
Okay. All right. After thinking and sitting and praying on this, I'm in favor of paying them a lot more than $7,000, especially the city councilman. Because at that number, 7,000, that's like $583 a month. And then if you divide the 14,000 by 12 with the mayor, that's $1,100 a month. Plus benefits, I get it, I understand. But I do want to, hopefully we all can come to a consensus that we can give them a little bit more as far as the city councilmen are. I don't know what we can all agree on, but I don't think $7,000 is enough. That's my opinion. And I would love to, if I may, raise it up, maybe 10 or 11,000, 12,000, and make it decent. Even if we do 10,000, that's $833 a month plus commission for a city council. It's not a living wage, but it sure is better than what do they get paid? $25 a month now. So the mayor gets $75 a month plus benefits. Maybe they get car allowance, they get this and that, but my main thing is I want to see them paid a little bit more than that.
Right now, the charter values the mayor at 3 times that of a council member. And really, the duties don't necessarily warrant that. The time expense might. Certainly, there's a lot of hands to shake and babies to kiss. But should the mayor be valued that high over a council member? Or should it be a little lower and more reasonable, regardless of what number we set?
Yes,
for
sir.
Council members.
Yes, sir. I'm in the opinion, that, every man puts on the pants and everyone puts on their pants just like everybody else does. So, I think that the mayor should be valued a little bit higher than the city councilman. Yes, I do agree with that, because the mayor's got a lot more things to do. And a lot of things that he's doing for the city, so I agree with that. But I think we just need to get a little bit closer than 3 times the amount of a city council. Because they do work too. They all put in a lot of hours.
Well, we've got it twice right here in the language we're looking at, 7 and 14. I think what it comes down to is really what's the intent? And what do we feel like the role of a city council person is versus city staff? City staff, that's a career, it's a job, it's an occupation, it's public service. To me,
Yes,
this
sir.
is my opinion. Public service, it's not, we have a city manager, we have a city secretary, we have city staff that run the city. This is a governance, and they represent constituents. They set budget, they hire the city manager, they have a job description of what they do. I tend to believe that, the city charter, the genesis of the city charter, had that as a role of public service, not as full-time, let's go to work 60, 80 hours a week as a city council person. Now, they may do that at times. But
Yes, sir.
that's, I think the intent of the city charter was that role of a city council person, not the city manager.
Yes, sir.
I agree.
But that was 1925.
It's today too, though.
Yeah.
It's the same.
Is it the
A
same?
council member cannot give direction to any employee at all. A council member, it takes 4 to give direction to the city attorney, city secretary, or city manager. It takes 4 of them. So even the mayor can't go into the city attorney or city manager's office and say, I want you to do this. It takes 4. It's not,
That was the very first lesson I ever had from the city council, is they don't direct anybody. They can't pull anyone's strings.
No.
They can't dictate how a department performs.
they can't direct an employee, period.
Yeah.
Any employee.
That's a city.
That's a city
City
manager,
manager and secretary, right? Yeah.
city secretary, city attorney.
Yes. City attorney.
And Jimmy, I see it, let's look at our local hospital board. Take one, Covenant, UMC. They're volunteer positions. They spend probably not as much time as a city council person, but
Yes,
they
sir.
spend time governing a hospital board. And their budgets are bigger than the city of Lubbock's budget, I would argue.
Yes, sir.
Or at least close to it, maybe not as big as the city, but close to it. It's a $1 billion budget. School board, yeah. School board the same way. We have $1 billion budget, and we can pay either. So it's just and I know people are pushing for a living wage. I understand that, but it kind of comes down to what is the intent of that role of that individual? Is it governance? Is it management? And in my opinion, city council, mayor are more governance. City staff is more management. So
Still something Bill said at the last meeting is that, when you get into the political, the election process, whatever this number is, and I'm not married to 7 to 14, but I mean, wherever we land that number, I think you got to consider, do you want somebody's livelihood on the ballot? It'd be like putting the city on the ballot every 2 years. If he gets fired, he's out looking for another job. I wouldn't want that to happen. So I'm just saying, wherever we set it, I think it's important just to make it where it's not somebody's livelihood.
And I understand the tendency to go back and look at the intent of the original charter. I get a little That's a little complicated because some of the intent of the charter wasn't necessarily pure. And we started forcing certain people in certain parts of town, and it took a court case that we're also talking about to fix that. I don't think that's this. I don't think the remuneration was set so low to ensure people of a certain color cannot participate in the process, but people of certain, who live in certain parts of town or certain lifestyles or whatever. I think the intent was, at the time, Texas had more or less been done with the professional politician. And looking for members of society who had real stake of ownership in the community, who wanted to participate and wanted to step forward and help. I think that's where we were 100 years ago, and I think that's still no intent. So I'm not married to one of the numbers, either one of the numbers myself. It certainly needs to be higher than 25 and 75. There's no argument on that. And I agree that it should be tied to a CPI. So that this is the last time we have this conversation for a very long time.
Yeah.
And I agree with taking the CPI raise out of the hands of council and putting it in the hands of the charter and saying, this is an automatic thing. That just simplifies life. I just don't have, at this point, it's not even two numbers. For me, it's one number. And then whether it's 20% more, 50% more for the mayor, we can negotiate that later. I'm just worried about the one number right now. I don't have that in my head.
Well, let me just say, I went back just for kicks to see how much people made, what was the wage
Yes, ma'am.
in 1917. And most people, depending on what your occupation was, it was between $18 and $26, $27 a week. So basically, it was a week's salary, depending on what part of the country you were in. But in Texas, it was about, you know, what you did.
70, $1,200 a month.
So, yeah. So about a week's salary is what they were looking at, I guess.
Of course, we were a smaller city. Where it was going.
So it wasn't a living wage then.
Yeah, and now we're growing and we're getting bigger, and levels just gonna get bigger. We're
But just because we're a big city
yes.
doesn't mean it's got to be a living wage. We are not a strong mayor city.
And that's interesting because the biggest city in Texas is a strong mayor city. They don't like the mayor at all at 20,000 a year. And so it's interesting that the top 25 cities are all over the map. And believe it or not, we're not the lowest. It's difficult to believe, but we're not the lowest.
It's easy to focus, and I know we had this conversation a couple of meetings ago, but it's easy to focus on that number. But I mean, just the ability to have health insurance. I mean, in today's
It's huge.
time, I mean, that is huge. I mean, small businesses, you know, that's not a, you know, just call your insurance agent, flip a switch and you get it. I mean, that's not the way it is anymore.
It's very
So I'm just saying, I don't want to discount, I mean, I know the numbers is gonna be what people focus on, but, you know, there are other things in there that a council member gets, and that's, I mean, a decent benefit.
You're right. The allowances aren't significant. But the total compensation package, including insurance, ain't nothing. Yeah, it's
Yes.
a huge thing.
So I'm not married to these numbers either. So whatever we come up with, I'm sure we'll get a consensus. And I'm with everybody. I agree. I understand. I just want to make it a little bit better. That's it. Thank you.
I have I'd like to have a little input here. I think one of the things that I want to ensure is that we not switch this role from a service role to a paid position role. I think what I heard from the public hearing was focused on the number that would help increase the pool of potential council members. And I'm just not so sure if that's going to be the determining factor that will cause someone to want to run for that position based on the pay. Don't get me wrong, I totally agree with everyone that the $25 is just, it's unrealistic and it doesn't even align with the role. So I agree with that. However, I just want to make sure that what we decide and you know, whatever we decide, we all know that the council could just kick that out. But what from our recommendation, I want to ensure that we keep the focus of the roles as a service with a compensation package, but not let the compensation package lead the position, that the service leads the position. And I feel like we've kind of gotten away from that a little bit.
Well, thank you. That's what I wanted to say about that. Appreciate it.
Shannon, do you have any thoughts on what that compensation package would entail in terms of compensation?
Well, I don't think we need to, you know, have a laundry list here, but we've kind of had some conversations around, we've talked about the insurance and, you know, all of the allowances that are provided with that. And then one thing I think we wanted to ensure is that what is needed for the role, because, you know, right now they may need internet, and who knows, 10, 20 years from now, that may not be the case at all. So I just think it should have some verbiage around the needs to fulfill the role.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
we've kicked around a lot of numbers. Lord knows we've kicked around a lot of numbers. At one point, we were looking at the average and the median across the other cities. And we didn't want to pin anything to either one of those numbers because that's a moving target. But at a point in time, it's a starting place. In my mind, I just randomly came up with a number for council, but if you go to the average across the cities, that's 14,166 per council member. I was thinking a little lower, but it's a number off of one of our worksheets. Is that a little bit closer?
How much?
14,166, we'll call it 14,000 a year minus taxes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was at random month, but
I was thinking, I thought 12 to 24. But I mean, I have no basis to get to that.
well, that's the thing. This, when I came up with 14,166, it came off of a piece of paper based on statistics. That's where I grabbed the number. But I was originally thinking when Jimmy was talking about a random month for council members. I don't know 50 or 100% for the mayor, 50%. I don't have that one yet. I don't have the first number yet.
That sheet that you're talking about that has the top 25 on there.
Yeah.
Right.
I took the top 5 out and the bottom 5 out. Sure. Just said, you know, which basically throws out everybody except El Paso, just because that's 5. And then, so I took the top 5, the bottom 5 out, and just redid the math. And the average mayor comes out to 15,786. Average council comes out to 9,180. I'm not saying I like that number. I'm just saying that's a different. It's a subset of what we're looking at. If you kind of throw out the, hey, we're not the big guys and we're not the little guys.
So you throw out the 5 highest cities.
Yeah,
The funny thing is.
I'd love to throw out the top 6, but that just didn't feel right.
Well, no, I understand. Well, the top one city is the asterisk in all this.
Well, yeah, and they're one of the low.
They don't like their mayor.
Right.
And they've got 2 million, or heck of a lot more, that 2 million people.
2 million.
And, strong mayor. He is the CEO, the buck stops with him. That's the interesting one. So you, yeah, almost have to throw that out statistically.
That kind of gets, those numbers you threw out there kind of gets in the area. I was thinking 60% of what the mayor makes. Does that math work or no math that?
What do you mean 60%? What do you mean?
Oh,
You talking about the difference between the 9 and 15?
That makes 60.
Yeah, it's not double. Yeah, it's not double.
I mean, now it's a third, right?
And really, none of these numbers are double because the average goes from 14 council to 20 mayor. The median is 3,600 to 69 mayor. So even the calculated numbers aren't double, which is what we end up with.
And I think we got down this road a minute ago. I don't know if you answered the question, but what do we value that mayor position over a council position? Or do we? I think we all kind of agree, or the sentiment I got was like, maybe it's 30-40% more. Maybe just because it does more. So, if we could decide on that, then we could throw a number out for one and then the other one's that. Maybe that's not that simple, but that's kind of the way it was working in my brain.
I'm sorry?
What were your numbers again?
15,786 and 9180.
And that's just the middle, that's the middle 15.
16 and 9.
16 and 9.
16 and 9.
You like round?
Yeah.
I'm
just
just-
like top numbers.
I'm educated.
I rounded the other way.
I don't want to explain to somebody where we came up to 15,786.
Minus taxes, as we were reminded.
16.
Yeah.
16 and 9.
Yeah, because, if you looked at the adjusted, it was 20, and some change, and 6,700, I guess. But I think we agreed we wanted to close that gap a little bit, right? Because that's about I think it's around the 30%. Our council person is around the 30% of the mayor. So in my mind, I was looking at 50 or 60 or something like that. Council person of the mayor. The mayor is 40% premium over the council person.
I mean, to have no more power, they do have to run all the meetings, which I don't want to read all those ordinances. And they, represent the city at a lot more events than the council. There's certainly a premium there. Doubles at 30%, 40%, I don't know.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I kind of like those numbers, 16, 10, I like that too.
They drop a bigger turnout, right?
Do what?
They drop a bigger turnout.
Everybody wants to see the top 10. Or like.
So just from that,
One person.
the voters actually consider the premium too, right? Would that be the right line of thinking? The voters think that the mayor's position is maybe a premium to the council, even though, when we pull it down, it's
I mean,
all
all
votes a vote,
I mean,
right?
all the data that we've got, there's a differential.
Mhm.
So
What's it say in the dictionary? Mayor,
what's your number here?
What's your number, Karen?
What's on the spot?
No number?
No, listen, I work for 8 years, for $25 a year, so I don't know. I don't,
Well, 10 grand is, for city council is $833 a month. That's not bad. Or we
what
can
you
do-
say,
10,000 is $833 a month. That's it. And of course, you subtract taxes and all that, so you're looking, yeah, you're not gonna make a whole lot, but at least it's more than $25.
yeah, the 15.9, I'm not necessarily, I think it's been established. Married to those numbers, it's just,
Something.
to me,
yeah.
it's what's the difference? And then, we can come up with one or the other.
Yes,
Add a
sir.
premium or deduct a percentage or.
I want to get away from, this is supposed to be helping with expenses that you have, dry cleaning, gas. stuff like that. This is not supposed to be wages.
It'll
This
be a reimbursement.
position, and I'm very passionate about it, so I may not be the person you need to talk to. Because this position is it's a service, it's a heart thing, it's a passion thing. So I just have a hard time just putting a number and just keep throwing numbers out because it's just a passion for me,
Yes,
so
ma'am.
I think that's my problem.
We're all trying to put a paycheck on what we
I
consider to
think
be a
that's my
volunteer
problem. I'm
position.
trying to put a paycheck on something that should be something you want to do for your community. And I mean, I get that it needs to be more than $25 a month. And it does. I mean,
Yes, ma'am.
you lose money every time you go to a meeting. But I just don't want to focus on the check. That's not what this position is, for this position, a council position, that's not what it's about.
I'm just wondering if, I know our charge in this is we're focusing on the council positions, the council member position, but I'm wondering if we start this, will it, cause a trickle down effect to other boards to where we will have to look at something compensating people to be on boards, because I know at the moment that's something that the city struggles with, is getting people to apply and be on board, so sit on board. So I'm just wondering if we're setting ourselves up for something like that. It's just a thought, and it probably doesn't, warrant any validity here in this conversation, but it's just a thought that came to my mind as we're looking at this.
This is Bill. I've thought about the same thing. But if we're talking about, let me just throw out a percentage. If we're talking about increasing council pay 1,000%, we can certainly talk about increasing board pay 1,000%. It's currently 0, multiply it by 1,000, it's still 0. So I get the concern. I had the thought myself, but I don't see that door opening.
That's really not our.
That's not our charge in this case, but
But it is something, I mean, it's not an unfair question. I just don't know that that's within our scope in this
and I don't know,
charter review.
raising the pay of someone who in the charter is paid opens the door for raising a volunteer position when there's 0 pay, right? I don't know that there's that direct line.
I mean, was there a reason we switched to annual versus monthly in here, or is it just?
It's just based off of the annual numbers y'all were talking about.
Oh.
That can switch.
If we want to continue to emphasize, service, I think a monthly number, and I know it's just semantics, but I mean, a monthly number, I think is a lot easier for somebody, because $14,000, that's a lot of money. I don't care who you ask.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money. But, $500 a month. I mean, you see what I'm saying? It just,
The charter currently talks about monthly pay. I don't
So-
mind keeping that.
right. I'd say it might be a little easier to communicate what we're trying to communicate by putting that number versus $14,000. That's not a lot of money.
And we'll come up with a big number. We'll do the math. We'll clean it up and then put that in. Is that a good point?
And we're,
We still don't know where
We
we
still don't know the
are.
number.
I just need a number.
Monthly, Amy. Divide something by 12.
We've decided. on something.
Absolutely.
so how are we gonna get to a number?
I'm still okay with taking the adjusted amount, even if you want to adjust the mayor to a certain percentage of the council,
What was the adjusted number?
561 for council, and I mean, we can round it up. We're down.
A month? What was the adjusted number for the mayor?
The adjusted for the mayor is 1684 a month.
What are you adjusting from?
We
The,
can-
you talking about the original?
From the 1917 to 2021
Yeah, that's it.
dollars.
The CPI adjustment on the original salaries.
But if you're just gonna do a percentage,
Well, that gets us back into the mayors with this much, the council members with this much.
that's what I said.
Yeah.
Do it for your percentages, however much you want to do that for.
Say it again.
So if you want to do mayor 60 and
Oh, okay.
council 30% or
Right.
60% or however you want to do it.
So if we pick just
Better starting
7,000 for council, we say the mayor's worth 50% more, it might be 10.5 for the mayor. 40%. Or 40%, or 60%.
Well, I'm just saying whatever you want to do.
Is there a dartboard in this building?
But that
that we
might
might
be a
use?
starting
We just-
point anyway for the council.
That's people you can throw darts at.
We'll leave Stuart out of this.
We don't have to come up with a number today. We're gonna have to come up with, I mean, I think they need to come up with a number.
I heard a small group kind of centered around a number higher than what we just talked about. I don't know if it was 4 people or 5 people or 3 people, but that we were kind of talking about a number higher than this, but certainly lower than some of the other.
16 and 9.
We were talking at 16 to 9 or 16 to 10 if you round a different way. Okay? Can we get consensus around that? I think, can we get a unanimous decision? I don't think that's possible.
So, and it doesn't have to be unanimous.
No.
And we're not voting today. We're not even really looking for consensus today. But I will,
We just need to pick a number to stick on.
I like the,
And we completely destroy the number next meeting.
yeah, no, that's probably gonna change. Why don't we do the 8 for the city and city councilman, and then what's the number 16 for the mayor? What would that be? Month?
40%?
You're talking about 8,000 a year?
No, 10 for the city and 16 for the city council, I mean, for the mayor. How much would that be? That's just a number, that's a monthly number.
10 and 16.
Yes, sir.
So 10,000's 833. So which way you want to round that?
833. What, 800, man? Let's do
Well, I was
800.
gonna say, if we're gonna switch to,
Yeah,
all right, so 800 council,
yes,
Wouldn't he have to say bank for 20?
that's what we do, yes.
round down. And then,
The city,
and
mayor,
then you went to 16.
yes, sir. I'm just throwing numbers out.
No, I thought, that's 1333.
There you
So
go.
you round that. One way or the other. Come up with
1300.
an even number.
How about that?
You got a number.
Something,
That's something to sleep on.
yes, sir.
Anybody want to-
Lower, leave lower.
Last question.
And those numbers that you just threw out, do they include the benefits, or are they additional to?
They're the cash in addition to the benefits.
Which, that was where headed. We had talked about
We don't know.
then let's just be silent.
I mean, when the charter was written, they didn't know there was going to be a cell phone allowance. They didn't, they didn't know there was going to be a car.
And we don't know what it's gonna be in 25 years.
Well, so
And so the conversation we had was, how do we very generically reference, there's other things? Is there language such that, the problem is they're not employees, so we can't reference that,
That's what we talked about. So, well, they get whatever benefits employees get, but
but that language,
I'm fine with just being silent.
I
I mean,
prefer, they managed to date to get there and to figure out how to make it work. I don't know that I want to restrict it, not knowing what that might be. I don't know how to.
yeah, I
Yeah.
I hate including a spreadsheet in a document like this. It just doesn't work in 50 years.
I'm fine with it. I mean, councils between 19 whatever and now have figured out a way to add, health benefits and
And adjust it.
reimbursements.
Yeah, adjust it.
So let them keep doing that.
Yep. I'm with you.
Go ahead, Jim.
My only question around letting them figure that out or keeping silent, what is the communication piece in the charter? How could we, where would we, or is there a place to have that so that it's clear? Or so that it's not implied, I guess.
What are you referencing, Chad? What are we not being clear on?
Well, I heard a couple of things. I heard keep it silent, but don't, and I also heard don't list out everything of what they get. So
What we're talking about is, right now, the city charter doesn't spell out cell phone allowance or car allowance or something like that. It's silent on those issues. So we don't know what they're going to need to be reimbursed for in 20, 30, or 100 years. So we didn't want to put any language in the compensation piece of the charter that would restrict or bind future councils on things we don't even know may or may not exist in 20 to 25 or 100 years.
And I think we want to be careful not to employees in this charter.
Right.
Yes.
Very careful with that.
So that's kind of what that's the nature of that conversation. I don't think we're trying to withhold or disguise anything. We're just trying to say it's worked for the last 100+ years to be silent on issues that, but we do need to address compensation. Is really what I think our focus is today.
well, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I have an issue with that when you say that it has worked, because if it has worked, then I don't think we'd be in the situation we're in today. Because until I was asked to sit on this committee, I had no knowledge that the members got any kind of reimbursement or what have you. And so how can we as a committee be okay with keeping it silent, and then the next group, similar group of people like us, have to come along and dig down in the weeds to find this type of information again, and sit around a table and go, oh, well, maybe we pay them $800 or maybe we pay them $10,000. Don't mean to get on my soapbox, but I'm just concerned that we are trying to do our due diligence in ensuring that this charter speaks to the people, but it's like a pick and choose here. So that's where I have some concerns, and maybe I'm just not clear. And maybe today wasn't the day for me to say, yeah, let's meet, because, knowing my situation, maybe my brain is a little foggy and I'm not clear on something, but I just have a concern with the silence.
I agree with you. I mean, that's why we had the conversation about, is there any kind of language we can put in there that, points it out that there are other benefits without being restrictive, or frankly committing, committing that we're going to, pay for health insurance, until this charter process is done again. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen, but, I think it'd be worthwhile to at least, have a sentence in there, and I'm just making up words on the fly, but, plus, other benefits or reimbursement as the city council may from time to time decide. I mean, that's vague, but at least it puts it on the table that there are other things.
Would we have the word non-cash in there to make sure that they don't, one of the benefits isn't an additional
Other
$10,000?
non-cash benefit, other fringe, well, and then, you get into we got into the discussion about, can we use the word fringe benefits? I don't know legally whether we can or can't. Because,
Well, I want to stay away
Of
from
the
tying
employee
in as employees, though.
well,
That's-
I know, that's why I say fringe benefit, that implies an employee, so, yeah. I think at a minimum, Shannon, at a very minimum, if we can't get language in there, frankly, language might just muddy the whole issue. But if we can't get language in there, then I think when we have a report to the council or whatever form that takes, I think it's worth, we landed on this number, with the full knowledge of these other benefits that are currently in place and that these may change from time to time. So I think we have an opportunity to communicate that, at least in a report, maybe not in the charter, but at least in a report. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I like that. I just feel like it needs to be spelled out somewhere. And like you said, if it can't be in the charter, at least in a report to say this is what we, have come to the conclusion of, so that maybe someone else can take that 30,000 view and say, oh yes, this needs to be added somewhere. And not just an implied thing, because then on the flip side of that, someone that is applying for or running for a position, they may opt out of the insurance, or they might not choose to take some of those advantage of some of those, and that should be okay as well.
Okay, makes sense.
All right. Thanks for those comments, Shannon. And trust me, I think you're not the only one suffering from brain fog at the moment, so. Any other comments related to Article 9, Section 14 related to compensation? Anything else related to Article 9 that you want to talk about?
I just want to make sure that we've got the, check out where the council people forfeit.
Yes.
Or what,
I want to make sure that was out.
What are you talking about?
Forfeit their $10.
The attendance, if you don't, you
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
I just want to make sure that's out.
That's out.
Oh, that's not a fringe benefit.
Okay. That was kind of the items on our agenda today. Anything else that we need to have on there in terms of discussion? Okay, 3.2 regarding future meeting dates. On my calendar, I've got Monday, May 17th at 1 o'clock. And then I've got Monday, May 24th at 1 o'clock.
Both of those will be at chambers, council chambers, just they'll go downstairs.
Downstairs,
You said the 17th and
the 24th.
We'll have lunch started at 12:30.
We'll vote on the 24th to what we want to recommend to city council at their June meeting. Is that correct? When's their June meeting? June the
Both 17th and the 24th.
1 o'clock. Yes. Lunch will be brought in at 12:30.
with action items on the 24th.
That's my goal. Yes. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much for everything, sir. Anything else? Courtney, you leave anything else? Amy? Okay. It is 6 o'clock and we are adjourned.